if I was in charge of the Palestinian people, I'd be really upset with like October 7th because
Why?
I'll tell you why. Because they went after a lot of civilians, and that's not a good strategy. Like if I'm in charge of Palestine, Gaza, and my goal is for the liberation.
But that's not accurate. That's not true. The majority of the Israelis that were killed by Israeli fire.
What I read, so I read Amnesty Report and Human Rights Watch, and those two are those reputable sources? I guess my first question.
Yeah, they are reputable.
So Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, and I can send you these articles probably after this. Both, I mean, sorry, you don't need that. I'm sure you've read them. Have both shown that 1,200-ish civilians were killed, majority by Hamas. There were some killed by the IDF, but
it's not accurate.
But then so is it that we don't believe Amnesty and
it's not
Human
that
Rights
it's just that number one. Again, it's a detail that may or may not be relevant to the larger picture, but the narrative that claims that Palestinians murdered over 1,000 Israelis has been refuted by very reputable sources. Electronic Intifada just came out with another report just recently, using predominantly Israeli sources, speaking to Israeli commanders, talking about the Hannibal.
That was real. That happened. The Hannibal Initiative, whatever it was. Yeah, that happened.
And more people now. Again, the majority. What is absolutely clear is that the majority of the people that were Israelis that were killed by Israeli fire, whether it was a mistake, whether it was a directive, whether it was this, whether it was that. The objective of the Palestinians who came out of the Gaza Strip was to take the military base and to take as many hostages as possible, so they could in order to have a prisoner swap. That was the objective. To go ahead there and kill civilians right, left, and center makes no sense. It was not the objective.
We agree it makes no sense, right? We agree it wouldn't make. In other words, you and I agree that it would.
And I don't believe they did.
Wouldn't. Well, it wouldn't. I guess we're at least in agreement that it wouldn't benefit the Palestinian people for there to be a civilian targeted attack. Because that's not going to. So I guess my question is, what am I missing? Because like, help me out. You know more on this stuff than I do. I'm looking at Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. They're telling me one thing. What do I do?
Well, I think part of the problem is that it took a very long time before anybody could actually get in and investigate this. So this is taking a very long time. More and more information is becoming available as time goes on. More and more Israeli sources are beginning to talk about what actually took place. So I think it's going to be a while before we actually have all the details in place and before somebody gets in there and does this independently. But from what I know, and I'll say this again, from what I know, the vast majority of the Israelis were killed by Israeli fire, by Israeli forces. I know that happened in Be'eri. I know that happened with helicopters that were shooting people as they were running one way and another. But again, I think we're focusing on the wrong issue here. I think the point is the larger issue here, and it's not that human life is not important. It's very important. Every life is sacred, and we don't want anybody to die. At the same time, we have to remember there's a concentration camp with over 2 million people. Bordering all these Israeli kibbutzim and settlements where people are living. People are enjoying a very high standard of living and so on. I had family members in Kibbutz Be'eri. I had family members in Kibbutz Zikim, which are just, Kibbutz Be'eri, of course, was hit very hard. The larger picture here is, in my opinion, that number one, no attention has been given by these people who enjoy this very high standard of living and wonderful life on these kibbutzim and in these settlements in that part of the country. No thought was ever given to the fact that 2 million people are living in a concentration camp 3 kilometers away from them, or even less. So I think that's the first thing we need to take into consideration. When we talk about envision anyone living a normal life outside of Nazi concentration camps and the differences between one and the other, and to think that people were living a regular life while these horrific things were happening to Jews and didn't care, that is shocking, as it should be. And this is the same thing. They didn't care about what was happening there.
I thought those specific communities actually specifically did care.
They did not care. If they cared, they would have done something. I used to go to Kibbutz Be'eri growing up every summer and every holiday. I had relatives there. Nobody ever talked about the fact that there's a concentration camp there. The fact that they voted slightly more left to center during the elections is completely irrelevant. By and large, Zionists and the Zionist mainstream cared nothing about this.
And I hear what you're saying to me, Jake. Jake, don't focus on the wrong point. It's not about. It's about the bigger picture that Israel's oppressing, and I'm not trying to refute that. The reason we're here and the reason I think these conversations are so important is because I think that people in general are good. Everyone wants the same things, and when you see half of people on the pro-Israel side and half on the pro-Palestine side, it's not because the values are different in my view. It's because their understanding of events is different. And so I do want to keep.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
During Jim Crow, would you say that about the whites in the South?
No.
During apartheid in South Africa, would you say that about the whites in South Africa?
No.
The Afrikaners?
No.
During World War II, would you say that about the Germans?
No.
Okay, so I mean, there's no difference here. Well, I don't know why these people get a pass. Why do Israelis get a pass?
Yeah, so let's work. But I say this to say that I hope you let me entertain another few minutes about Hamas. And I hope you don't take these questions and what I'm saying to be dismissive or to try to use kind of a red herring to get away from the real issues.
But why are you asking so much about Hamas? Well, why is it so important to you?
Well,
what is it they were trying?
I want to get your permission to ask about them so that you don't ask questions like that.
Of course, yeah.
Because the why is for all the reasons I just said is because I think that
I'm not a spokesperson for Palestinians or for Hamas.
Yeah.
I can tell you what I think and what I believe.
But here's the why is because I think it's important to get to specific issues because my belief is not. I don't think this issue is that analogous to the Jim Crow or to the Nazi era. I think that there are. I think that there's legitimate disagreements and misunderstandings people have, and I want to be able to talk about a point and us to have an. Okay. You need to take me at my word that I'm being good faith here, that I'm being sincere in my questions, and I have a genuine curiosity. So. My question is, the Amnesty International report and Human Rights Watch both showed that the majority of civilians killed were by Hamas. What should I do with that information? Do I disregard it? Are they lying to me? Is it a conspiracy?
I don't think they're lying. I think based on information they gathered at the time that they gathered, that's probably the information that they had.
And is it true? Is it false?
But I think it's short of the truth. And again, like I said, there's a report that just came out on electronic intifada that demonstrates that the vast majority of the Israelis that were killed on that day or during that time were killed by Israeli fire. And again, like I said, they got Israeli
where did it show
sources
that?
and so on.
Where did it show that? Where was that?
Electronic intifada.
Is that? I mean, come on, but that
Electronic Intifada is probably the most reliable news source on Palestine that there is, and I'm not arguing with what Amnesty.
The title is Electronic Intifada. How could that be? That's not an unbiased source.
It is an unbiased source.
Do you think so?
I know them, and I know it, of course.
Do you think the Electronic Intifada takes seriously the Israeli viewpoint because their name is Electronic Intifada?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to start a newspaper.
It's a reliable.
I have a newspaper. It's called the Nakba.
Okay.
I mean, these are terms that are heated terms that are used.
It doesn't matter. As a resource, look, I don't want to. Again, we're arguing about the electronic intifada. I'm just telling you, it's a reliable news source. If you don't want to believe me, don't believe me. But it is a reliable news source, and they say differently. But the point is, again, we're focusing on what happened and who killed who and how many. The bottom line is, when you have millions of people living in a concentration camp, when you have millions of people subjected to apartheid, when you got millions of people who are living a life of terror where children are being killed, people don't have access to water. And we're talking about a place where that 5-minute drive out of the Gaza Strip concentration camp, Israelis are living, drinking water, having electricity, there's no problem. 5 minutes away. And the only reason that concentration camp exists is because the Israelis, regardless of where they live, are allowing it to continue. They were allowing it to continue. They were allowing it, and they were enforcing it, and they were voting for governments who continued to enforce it and maintain a concentration camp full of Palestinian civilians right there on the southern coast of the country. That is reprehensible. So whether Palestinians came out and killed this many or that many Israelis, it may be sad, but it is not relevant to the larger picture. The larger picture here, that I'll say it again, millions of Palestinians living in a concentration camp guarded by Israelis, maintained by Israel, put in place by Israel. And there's no conversation about why are we not dismantling this? Why are we not liberating these people, just like Jews were liberated from concentration camps after World War II? That needs to be the conversation.
So let's talk about that. Let me move to the next point.
Sure.
I want to ask you about, and then I'll come back to that, because the final thing I'd say about Hamas, and I think when I talk about Hamas, you don't love what I'm saying, and I think it's because you're saying, Jake, why are you focusing on Hamas?
No, you're focusing on a particular day of a particular event,
and you're saying, Jake, there's a bigger picture. But let me tell why. But let me say
not yet clear.
Let me say one more thing about why I think it is important, not just to feel sympathy for Israelis, but for Palestinians. If I'm a Palestinian living in Gaza, what I want is a government who's going to stand up for me. And when Hamas, I guess what I'm asking you is, can we both just agree that like in a perfect utopian world, there'd be a government in Gaza who treats people better than Hamas?
No. In a perfect world, there will be no Gaza Strip. People in Palestine will be free to live, to go back to their homes, to go back to their lands, to enjoy the water and the wealth and all the resources that exist to other people who live between the river and the sea. That would be happening in the perfect world. What it doesn't matter who is the warden in this particular, who is running this particular concentration camp.
Why doesn't
it happens to be Palestinians? It happens to be Palestinians who were voted in. It doesn't matter. Hamas may be the party that's in place right now. But there's many reasons for that. Hamas is a resistance organization that would never have been established had there not been the oppression, the ethnic cleansing, the apartheid. Had all these crimes by Israel not been committed, Palestinians would not have had to establish another resistance organization.
Yeah.
So it's a resistance to oppression.
There's a cause and effect. But let's say I hate Trump, and let's say I don't like Donald Trump. I'm not a big fan. If you say to me, but Jake, Donald Trump is just a result of this and this and this, and that could all be true. And I could say, yeah, but I still don't like Donald Trump.
It's not the same analogy.
It's not, but I'm saying, like,